20 black celebrities who had tragic lives due to illness. Then and now, 2026. What if the person making you laugh on television was quietly struggling to breathe? What if the athlete you cheered for was fighting a disease more dangerous than any opponent she ever faced? What if the voice you grew up hearing, the one that shaped your childhood, belonged to a man who almost didn't survive long enough to record a single note? Behind every spotlight is a shadow. Behind every smile is a story the cameras never caught. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on 19 iconic black celebrities whose battles with illness were as extraordinary as their achievements. Some of these stories will shock you. Some will move you to tears. All of them will remind you that greatness is never built without cost. Welcome to Black Excellence Legends. Drop a heart if you're ready. Samuel L. Jackson. He is one of the most recognizable faces in Hollywood. A man whose presence alone commands attention, whose voice fills a room before he even speaks a full sentence. With over 150 film credits and a career spanning more than 5 decades, Samuel L. Jackson is, by almost every measure, a legend. But the version of Samuel L. Jackson the world fell in love with almost never existed. In the 1970s and early 1980s, Jackson was struggling. His career wasn't moving the way he had hoped, and the pressure of navigating an industry that didn't always make space for black artists wore on him deeply. He turned to drugs and alcohol to cope, a choice that quietly consumed years of his life. By the late 1980s, his addiction had escalated to a point that was no longer manageable or invisible. He nearly died from a drug overdose. That moment, lying at the edge of his own destruction, became the turning point that saved his life. His family staged an intervention. His wife, LaTanya Richardson, and his daughter made it clear: get help or lose everything. Jackson entered rehabilitation and began the painful, unglamorous process of rebuilding himself from the inside out. He has described those early days of sobriety as the hardest work he has ever done. Harder than any role, harder than any performance. What came next is the career most people know. In 1991, director Spike Lee cast him in Jungle Fever as Gator, a crack-addicted brother, a role that required Jackson to draw from experiences dangerously close to his own. He didn't just act the character, he inhabited him. The performance earned him the Best Supporting Actor award at the Cannes Film Festival. From there, the trajectory was unstoppable. Pulp Fiction in 1994, Jackie Brown, the Marvel Cinematic Universe as Nick Fury, and a filmography that has grossed over $27 billion worldwide, the highest of any actor in Hollywood history. Samuel L. Jackson turned his lowest chapter into the foundation for his greatest. Sobriety for him was not a limitation, it was liberation. His story is proof that the most powerful comebacks are always built on the hardest falls. The world almost lost him. Instead, it gained one of its greatest storytellers. Wanda Sykes. Wanda Sykes has spent her entire career making people laugh. A sharp, fearless comedian who has never shied away from uncomfortable truths, whether on stage, on screen, or in interviews. Her wit is surgical. Her delivery is effortless. But in 2011, she faced something no punchline could soften: a breast cancer diagnosis that changed the course of her life. She discovered a lump during a routine procedure, a moment that arrived without warning, as these moments so often do. The diagnosis was early-stage breast cancer, and Wanda faced a decision that no woman should have to make lightly. After consulting with her doctors and processing the emotional weight of what lay ahead, she chose to undergo a double mastectomy, a preventative surgical decision that would remove both breasts to stop the cancer from spreading and reduce the risk of future recurrence. The recovery was long and physically painful, but what struck those around her, and eventually the public, was her refusal to let the experience shrink her. Wanda chose to speak openly about her diagnosis and her surgery, discussing the experience on The Ellen DeGeneres Show in 2011 with characteristic honesty and even moments of dark humor. She talked about body image, about the fear, about the reconstruction process, and about what it means to look in the mirror and see a body that has been permanently altered. For millions of women, particularly Black women, who face disproportionately higher rates of aggressive breast cancer diagnoses and lower rates of early detection, Wanda's willingness to be public about her journey was more than inspiring. It was potentially life-saving. She used her platform to encourage screenings, to normalize the conversation around mastectomy, and to remind women that survival and identity are not diminished by the physical changes illness demands. Wanda Sykes never stopped performing. She continued working through her recovery, returned to stand-up, starred in The Upshaws on Netflix, and remained one of the sharpest voices in American comedy. She proved that humor isn't a way of avoiding pain. Sometimes it is precisely how the strongest people walk through it. Courage doesn't always look like silence. Sometimes it looks like a woman standing on a stage, making the whole room laugh because she decided she was still here to do exactly that. Muhammad Ali. There has never been anyone quite like Muhammad Ali. Not in boxing, not in sports, and arguably not in the broader story of American cultural history. He was fast, he was beautiful, he was loud, and he was right. And the combination of those qualities made him one of the most compelling figures of the 20th century. Born Cassius Marcellus Clay Jr. in 1942 in Louisville, Kentucky, he became heavyweight champion of the world 3 times, defeated some of the greatest fighters who ever lived, and used his platform to challenge racial injustice and the Vietnam War at enormous personal cost. But in 1984, when Ali was 42 years old, a diagnosis arrived that would define the final chapter of his life: Parkinson's disease. The neurological condition, which causes progressive deterioration of motor control, including trembling, stiffness, and slowed movement, was, for a man whose greatest instrument had always been his body, a particular kind of cruelty. The man who had once moved through a boxing ring like water, the man who had floated and stung and danced with an elegance no heavyweight before or since has matched, would spend his remaining years fighting a battle with no opponent to face directly. Throughout the 1990s and 2000s, the tremors became visible. His speech slowed. His movements, once so fluid they seemed choreographed, became labored. But Ali never hid. He appeared at the 1996 Atlanta Olympics to light the torch, his hand trembling visibly, his face composed, and the entire world held its breath and then exhaled into applause. It was one of the most powerful images in sports history, a man showing the world exactly what courage looks like when it is stripped of performance. He continued to speak, to travel, to advocate for humanitarian causes, and to simply exist publicly, refusing to let shame or diminishment define his illness. He passed away on June 3, 2016, at the age of 74, after a 32-year battle with the disease. The tributes that followed came from every corner of the world, from every religion, every nation, and every political persuasion. Ali taught us that the true measure of a fighter is not how hard they hit, but how long they stand. James Earl Jones. There are voices that narrate the background of a life, sounds you hear on the radio, in a theater, in a darkened cinema. And then there are voices that feel like they belong to the universe itself. James Earl Jones had one of those voices. Deep, resonant, unhurried, and utterly distinctive, it gave life to some of the most iconic characters in modern storytelling. Darth Vader in Star Wars, Mufasa in The Lion King, and a towering roster of stage and screen roles spanning nearly 7 decades. Born in 1931 in Arkabutla, Mississippi, Jones grew up in a household marked by abandonment. His father left when he was young, and spent much of his childhood with a stutter so severe that he barely spoke at all for years during his adolescence. The voice that would one day be considered among the greatest in entertainment history was, for a long time, trapped. It was through poetry and theater in high school that Jones began to find his way back to language, a journey that became the quiet foundation of everything that followed. In the late 1990s, he was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, a condition that affects the body's ability to regulate blood sugar and carries serious long-term implications for the heart, kidneys, eyes, and nervous system. For an actor who had built his life around presence and performance, managing a chronic illness while maintaining a working career required significant adaptation. Jones spoke candidly about the lifestyle changes the diagnosis demanded, and he approached those changes with the same disciplined patience that had defined his artistic life. He continued working well into his 80s, lending his voice to the 2019 remake of The Lion King and appearing in productions that reminded new generations why his name had always carried such weight. He passed away on September 9th, 2024, at the age of 93, a man who had lived nearly a century, overcome a childhood of silence and struggle, built one of the most respected careers in performing arts history, and faced illness with quiet, unshakable dignity. James Earl Jones leaves behind a voice that will never fully go silent, because the stories it told are still being heard. Beyoncé. There is perhaps no artist alive who occupies quite the space that Beyoncé does. She is a global phenomenon, a performer, songwriter, producer, actress, and cultural architect whose influence stretches across music, fashion, film, and social justice. She has won more Grammy Awards than any artist in history, with 32 as of 2024. She has sold over 100 million records worldwide. She has headlined Coachella, performed at 2 Super Bowl halftime shows, and built a creative empire that shows no signs of slowing. And yet, in 2017, one of the most public years of her life, Beyoncé faced something deeply private and deeply human. After giving birth to twins Sir and Rumi Carter in June of that year, she experienced postpartum depression, a condition that affects approximately 1 in 5 women following childbirth and is characterized by persistent sadness, emotional exhaustion, anxiety, and a disconnection from oneself and one's newborn that can be frightening in its intensity. Beyoncé spoke about this experience with unusual vulnerability in her 2018 documentary, Homecoming, and in subsequent interviews. She described feeling as though she no longer recognized herself, that the woman in the mirror was a stranger, hollowed out by pregnancy complications, a difficult recovery, and the emotional weight of bringing 2 new lives into the world while the entire planet watched. Her pregnancy had been medically challenging. She later revealed she had developed preeclampsia and required an emergency C-section, spending weeks in recovery before she could hold her babies without pain. Rather than remain silent, she channeled those experiences into art, into the Lemonade visual album and later Renaissance, works that explored vulnerability, identity, and the complexity of being a woman in full. In doing so, she gave permission to millions of women, particularly Black women, who are statistically less likely to receive adequate mental health support during the postpartum period, to name what they were feeling without shame. Beyoncé's willingness to speak from the shadows of her own experience is as significant as any award she has ever won. Strength is not the absence of struggle. She has spent her career proving exactly that. Tisha Campbell. Most people know Tisha Campbell as Gina from Martin, the warm, funny, fiercely talented actress who lit up one of the most beloved sitcoms of the 1990s. Her energy was electric, her comedic timing impeccable, and her chemistry with Martin Lawrence made the show a cultural institution. What most of those same people did not know was that throughout the years she was making them laugh, Tisha Campbell was quietly fighting a disease that was attacking her from within. In 2002, shortly after giving birth to her first son, Zen, Tisha began experiencing a persistent cough that wouldn't resolve, something she initially dismissed as a cold that had outstayed its welcome. Lesions appeared on her neck and arms. During a scene on the set of My Wife and Kids, she found herself visibly panicked, struggling to breathe after singing. She went to her doctor. She was referred to a pulmonologist, and she received a diagnosis she had never heard of before: sarcoidosis, a stage 1 diagnosis that would reshape everything. Sarcoidosis is an inflammatory disease in which the immune system overreacts, causing clusters of inflamed tissue called granulomas to form in various organs. It most commonly affects the lungs and lymph nodes, but can also involve the brain, heart, eyes, and skin. Black women are 3 times more likely to be diagnosed with sarcoidosis than white women, and the condition can progress rapidly if not managed carefully. After the birth of her second son, Ezekiel, the disease progressed to stage 2, a frightening development that forced Tisha to make serious changes in how she lived, worked, and prioritized her health. She drew strength from a painful place, watching Bernie Mac, a fellow entertainer she admired deeply, battle stage 4 sarcoidosis before his death in 2008. She refused to follow that path. She committed to diet, exercise, and stress management with a discipline that eventually paid off. In 2024, she announced that she had been in remission for 4 years. The granulomas no longer detectable at the base of her brain. Tisha Campbell showed up for us for decades while carrying a weight we never saw. That is not just strength, that is grace. Gabrielle Union. Gabrielle Union has always projected power. On screen, she plays characters who are sharp, resilient, and in control. In interviews, she is articulate, composed, and direct. She is the kind of woman who seems to have already figured out the answers before the questions are finished. But behind that composed exterior, for years, Gabrielle Union was living a private nightmare, one that no amount of success, beauty, or professional achievement could touch. For more than a decade, Gabrielle suffered from endometriosis, a condition in which tissue similar to the uterine lining grows outside the uterus, causing severe chronic pain, inflammation, and in many cases significant damage to fertility. The condition affects approximately 10% of women of reproductive age worldwide, yet it is frequently misdiagnosed or dismissed, sometimes for years. For Gabrielle, the physical pain was relentless, but the deeper wound was what the disease did to her dream of becoming a mother. She experienced 8 or 9 miscarriages, a loss so repeated and so intimate that she has described it as a grief cycle that never fully ends, each one its own trauma layered on top of the last. She underwent what she called extreme measures in her attempts to carry a pregnancy to term, trying every medical avenue available before receiving the diagnosis that her condition made a successful pregnancy unlikely. The word unlikely, clinical, measured, devastating, became a wall she spent years trying to find a door through. That door came through surrogacy. In November 2018, Gabrielle and her husband, NBA star Dwayne Wade, welcomed their daughter Kavia James through a surrogate, a moment Gabrielle described as the most profound of her life. She wept, she held her daughter, and then she did something equally important. She talked about all of it publicly, with honesty that cut through the silence that so often surrounds infertility. Gabrielle Union has become one of the most visible advocates for women navigating endometriosis and reproductive challenges. She turned the most painful chapter of her life into a conversation that has helped thousands of women feel seen. Motherhood, she has said, does not come in one shape. Love never has. Oprah Winfrey. Oprah Winfrey is one of the most powerful, most influential, and most recognized human beings on the planet. From her groundbreaking talk show that ran for 25 seasons, to her media empire, her philanthropic work, her film productions, and her ongoing cultural presence, she has built something that transcends celebrity. She is, in many ways, a living institution. And yet, for all that external power, Oprah has spent significant portions of her life battling something quiet, invisible, and deeply personal: her own body. In 2007, Oprah was diagnosed with a thyroid condition, specifically an imbalance in her thyroid function that her doctors identified as hyperthyroidism, followed by hypothyroidism. Her thyroid swinging between overactivity and underactivity in a way that made her body feel completely beyond her control. The symptoms were exhausting and disorienting. Extreme fatigue, significant weight fluctuation, mood swings, and a persistent feeling that no matter what she did, her body was working against her. For a woman who had publicly and repeatedly attempted to manage her weight and health over decades, the thyroid condition added a medical dimension to a struggle her audience had watched unfold for years. Oprah spoke about this experience on her show and in her magazine OWN, with the kind of raw self-examination she has always brought to difficult subjects. She was candid about the shame she had once felt, the belief, reinforced by decades of public scrutiny, that her fluctuating weight was simply a failure of discipline. The thyroid diagnosis reframed that narrative. Her body had not been failing her because of weakness. It had been battling a condition she hadn't known existed. The broader message she carried from that experience, that health is complex, that the body is not always obedient, and that self-acceptance is not surrender but wisdom, resonated with millions of women who had watched their own bodies change in ways they didn't fully understand. Oprah Winfrey has said that the most difficult journey she has ever taken was the one inward. For a woman who has faced poverty, trauma, and the weight of an industry that was not built for her, that is a statement worth sitting with. Serena Williams. Serena Williams is the greatest tennis player of all time. That is not a generous interpretation or a matter of opinion. It is a statistical, factual conclusion supported by 23 Grand Slam singles titles, the most in the Open era for any player, male or female. She dominated the sport for more than 2 decades, returned from injuries that would have ended most careers, and competed at the highest level of professional tennis until the age of 40. She is, by any measure, an extraordinary athlete, and in September 2017, just 1 day after giving birth to her daughter Olympia via emergency C-section, Serena almost died. She recognized the signs herself. A history of pulmonary embolisms, blood clots in the lungs, had taught her what to look for. When she began feeling short of breath the morning after her delivery, she told a nurse she needed a CT scan and a blood thinner immediately. The medical team initially dismissed her concerns. Serena pushed back, firmly, insistently, with the authority of a woman who knew her own body and her own history. The scan confirmed a bilateral pulmonary embolism, blood clots in both lungs. She was rushed back into surgery. The clots were treated. Additional complications followed: a hematoma, further surgeries, weeks of recovery in which she was unable to walk, unable to care for her newborn daughter, unable to do anything except try to survive. She then experienced what she described as significant postpartum depression, the isolation of a difficult recovery compounded by the emotional complexity of new motherhood. She has spoken about feeling disconnected from Olympia in those early weeks, about the guilt that layered over everything, about the silence that surrounded her experience at a time when the world simply expected her to be strong. Serena chose not to stay silent. She wrote about her experience in a 2018 CNN op-ed, forcing a national conversation about maternal mortality, a crisis that disproportionately affects Black women in the United States, who are 3 to 4 times more likely to die from pregnancy-related complications than white women. She nearly became a statistic. Instead, she became a voice. Magic Johnson. On November 7, 1991, Irvin "Magic" Johnson stood before a bank of microphones at the Great Western Forum in Los Angeles and told the world something that no one was prepared to hear. He had tested positive for HIV and was retiring from basketball immediately. He was 32 years old. He was at the height of his fame, And in 1991, an HIV diagnosis carried a weight that extended far beyond medicine. It carried stigma, fear, and in the minds of many, a death sentence. The silence in the room that day was not the silence of shock alone. It was the silence of a world confronting something it had tried to keep invisible. Magic Johnson had been the face of the Los Angeles Lakers during their legendary Showtime era. 5 NBA championships, 3 MVP awards, 12 All-Star selections. His smile was as famous as his no-look passes. He was joy made athletic. And now he was telling the world he had a virus that, in the early 1990s, was killing people at a devastating rate, with limited treatment options and enormous social consequence. What happened next was not what most people expected. Magic Johnson did not disappear. He did not retreat into silence or shame. Instead, he became one of the most visible and effective HIV/AIDS advocates in American public life. He returned to play in the 1992 NBA All-Star Game, in which he was voted MVP by the fans, and was part of the legendary 1992 U.S. Olympic Dream Team that won gold in Barcelona. He has spent more than 3 decades speaking publicly about HIV prevention, funding research in community health initiatives, and demonstrating through his own life that the diagnosis was not an ending. Today, more than 33 years after that press conference, Magic Johnson is 65 years old, healthy and thriving, a testament to advances in antiretroviral treatment and to the power of a man who refused to let stigma write his story. He turned the most devastating announcement of his life into a 30-year education campaign. That is a different kind of championship. Missy Elliott. Missy Elliott changed music. That is not a small statement. It is a specific, documented truth. As a rapper, singer, songwriter, and producer who emerged in the mid-1990s, she brought a creative audacity to hip-hop and R&B that had no real precedent. Her videos were visual masterpieces of absurdist invention. Her production sensibility, developed alongside Timbaland, created sonic textures that felt genuinely new. Songs like The Rain, Supa Dupa Fly, Get Your Freak On, Work It, and Lose Control didn't just top charts. They rewired what people thought popular music was allowed to do. In 2023, she became the first female rapper inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. But for a significant stretch of her career, Missy Elliott was fighting a battle that had nothing to do with charts or awards. Around 2008, she began experiencing symptoms that she initially attributed to exhaustion or the relentless pace of the music industry. Extreme fatigue that didn't resolve with rest, a racing heart that arrived without warning, trembling in her hands that made writing, her most essential act, nearly impossible. The diagnosis was Graves' disease, an autoimmune disorder in which the immune system attacks the thyroid gland, causing it to produce excessive amounts of thyroid hormone. The condition leads to a cascade of physical symptoms: hyperthyroidism, rapid heartbeat, anxiety, weight loss, hand tremors, and in some cases, significant changes in vision. For a performer and writer, the tremors were particularly cruel. Missy has spoken about sitting down to write and finding that her hands simply would not cooperate. A terrifying experience for an artist whose creativity had always been her most reliable constant. She stepped back from the spotlight, focused on treatment and recovery, and rebuilt her health through a combination of medication, lifestyle changes, and the kind of patient discipline that doesn't generate headlines but saves lives. Her return to music was gradual, a new single here, a collaboration there, building back toward the full creative force she had always been. By the time she was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2023, she was not just celebrated for her past work. She was celebrated as a woman who had refused to let her body take her music. Toni Braxton. Toni Braxton's voice is one of the defining instruments of 1990s popular music. Low, intimate, and achingly precise, It turned ballads into confessionals and made heartbreak feel like an art form. Her self-titled 1993 debut album sold over 10 million copies worldwide and won 3 Grammy Awards. Unbreak My Heart, released in 1996, remains one of the best-selling singles in music history, topping charts in more than 15 countries. She was, by every measure, a superstar. But in 2008, Toni Braxton was diagnosed with lupus, a chronic autoimmune disease in which the immune system attacks the body's own healthy tissue, causing inflammation that can affect the joints, skin, kidneys, brain, heart, and lungs. For a singer whose entire professional life depended on the health of her cardiovascular and respiratory system, the diagnosis was not simply a personal medical challenge. It was a direct threat to her career. The symptoms in the early years were severe. She experienced periods of profound physical weakness, days when getting out of bed felt genuinely impossible, when the inflammation in her body made ordinary movement painful. She was hospitalized multiple times with complications related to lupus, including a cardiac event in 2010 in which she was diagnosed with a microvascular angina condition that her doctors connected to her autoimmune disease. She was forced to cancel performances, postpone recording sessions, and confront the very real possibility that her body might no longer be capable of sustaining the career she had spent her life building. She did not accept that conclusion. Through a combination of medical treatment, careful management of her energy and stress levels, and a determination that has consistently defined her, even in her most commercial moments, Toni Braxton kept singing. She reunited with producer Babyface in 2014 for the album Love, Marriage, and Divorce, which won the Grammy for Best R&B Album in 2015, proof that neither illness nor time had diminished what she had to offer. Toni Braxton taught us that survival and artistry are not separate things. Sometimes continuing to create is itself the act of healing. Robin Roberts. Robin Roberts has been a fixture of American mornings for decades. As co-anchor of Good Morning America, she has delivered news of wars, disasters, elections, and cultural moments with a warmth and steadiness that have made her one of the most trusted faces on American television. She is professional, unflappable, and deeply human, qualities that were tested in ways her audience watched in real time, because Robin Roberts faced her most serious battles in public. In July 2007, Roberts was diagnosed with early-stage breast cancer. The diagnosis was shocking, but treatable. She underwent surgery, chemotherapy, and radiation, and returned to Good Morning America throughout her treatment, visibly changed by the process, but present, working, and modeling for millions of viewers that illness and professional life do not have to exist in separate compartments. She completed her treatment and was declared cancer-free. The story seemed to have its resolution. Then, in 2012, came a second diagnosis that was far more serious: myelodysplastic syndrome, or MDS, a rare and potentially life-threatening bone marrow disorder in which the marrow fails to produce enough healthy blood cells. MDS can develop as a secondary condition following chemotherapy treatment, and it carries a significantly higher level of medical complexity than a standard cancer diagnosis. The only curative treatment is a bone marrow transplant. Roberts announced her diagnosis on air in June 2012, again demonstrating the transparency that had made her viewers feel genuinely invested in her survival. Her sister, Sally Ann, proved to be a compatible donor, a match that Roberts has described as a miracle. The transplant took place in September 2012. The recovery was grueling and extended, requiring months away from the show and a complete rebuilding of her immune system from the ground up. She returned to Good Morning America in February 2013, to a standing ovation from her studio audience and to an outpouring of viewer response that demonstrated how deeply personal her journey had become to the people who watched her every morning. Robin Roberts survived not once, but twice. Her presence on television today is not just professional achievement, it is a daily declaration of survival. Regina King. Regina King has spent 3 decades building one of the most respected careers in American film and television. From her early work on 227 as a teenager to her Oscar-winning performance in If Beale Street Could Talk in 2018, from her Emmy-winning roles in American Crime to her directorial debut with One Night in Miami, she has moved through the industry with a quiet authority that commands respect across generations. She is the kind of artist other artists study. But in January 2022, Regina King's world was shattered by a loss that no career achievement, no award, and no professional accomplishment could prepare anyone for. The death of her only son, Ian Alexander Jr., who died by suicide at the age of 26. He had struggled with mental health challenges, and his death, coming just days after his birthday, devastated his mother in ways that she has only begun to speak about publicly, carefully, and on her own terms. In the months that followed, Regina King largely withdrew from public life. She had been scheduled to direct and appear in various projects. Most were paused. The grief was, by her own account, all-consuming, the kind that doesn't follow a timeline or respond to external expectations. She has spoken about leaning on therapy, on close friends, and on her faith to navigate a darkness that she has described as unlike anything she had previously encountered. What Regina King has demonstrated in the years since is something quieter and more difficult than a dramatic comeback. She has shown what it looks like to continue living after an unimaginable loss. She has returned to directing, to acting, to public life, not because the grief has ended, but because she has chosen to carry it forward rather than be defined by it. In 2023, she appeared at various industry events and continued developing projects that reflect her artistic vision. Mental health, particularly grief, loss, and the private suffering of public figures, remains a subject that American culture is still learning how to discuss honestly. Regina King's willingness to exist in that conversation, even imperfectly, even painfully, matters. Some battles leave marks that never fully disappear. The question is whether we let those marks become our story or simply part of it. Darryl Strawberry. Darryl Strawberry was, at his peak, one of the most gifted baseball players of his generation. A right fielder with extraordinary power and a natural elegance at the plate, he was selected to 8 All-Star games during his career with the New York Mets and New York Yankees. His combination of home run power, 335 career home runs, and defensive ability made him one of the most feared hitters of the 1980s and early 1990s. He was the kind of talent that makes scouts' reports run out of superlatives. He was also a man who struggled deeply and publicly with drug and alcohol addiction that haunted his career and led to multiple suspensions, legal troubles, and the painful erosion of what could have been a Hall of Fame legacy. By the time the 1990s ended, Strawberry's professional story had become more cautionary than celebratory. Then, in 1998, came a diagnosis that reframed everything: colon cancer. He was 36 years old. The surgery that followed removed part of his colon, and while the immediate prognosis was cautiously optimistic, the cancer returned in 2000, this time accompanied by a physical deterioration and a mental health crisis that compounded the medical challenge. He faced his mortality not in the abstract, but concretely, repeatedly, and with the knowledge that his body had already been through years of abuse. But Darryl Strawberry survived. He overcame the cancer. He addressed his addiction through faith-based recovery programs. He has been outspoken about his Christian faith as the anchor of his sobriety, and emerged from the wreckage of his health crises as a different version of himself. He has dedicated years since to speaking at recovery centers, churches, and community organizations, sharing his story with an openness that requires more courage than hitting a home run in a packed stadium ever did. Darryl Strawberry is proof that a life can contain both spectacular failure and genuine redemption, and that neither has to be the final word. What matters most is what a person does after the worst has happened. Stevie Wonder. Stevie Wonder is one of the most celebrated musicians in human history. His career, which began when he signed with Motown Records at the age of 11 as Little Stevie Wonder, spans more than 6 decades and has produced some of the most beloved songs ever written. Superstition, Isn't She Lovely, Sir Duke, I Just Called to Say I Love You, Overjoyed, Higher Ground. The catalog is almost incomprehensibly rich, both in its volume and in its emotional range. He has won 25 Grammy Awards, including a Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award, and his influence on R&B, soul, pop, and funk is simply incalculable. Born premature in 1950 in Saginaw, Michigan, Stevie Wonder lost his sight as a newborn when excess oxygen in the incubator damaged his retinas, a tragedy that, by his own account, he has never experienced as a limitation, so much as a different way of inhabiting the world. His extraordinary musical gifts, perfect pitch, multi-instrumental ability, and an emotional intuition for melody that defies categorization have always been the center of the conversation around him. But in 2019, Stevie Wonder revealed that he had been diagnosed with a serious kidney condition, chronic kidney disease that had quietly been affecting his health for some time and had reached a point where intervention was necessary. He announced that he would be taking a break from touring and performing to undergo a kidney transplant, which he confirmed took place successfully in 2019. The donor was a close friend, and the procedure, while successful, required an extended period of recovery and a fundamental adjustment to his lifestyle, diet, and schedule. For an artist who has toured relentlessly throughout his career, the enforced stillness of recovery was its own kind of challenge. He has spoken about the experience with characteristic philosophical equanimity, gratitude for the second chance, for the friend who gave him a kidney, for the medical team, and for a body that, after more than 7 decades of extraordinary use, still had more to give. Stevie Wonder remains one of the most irreplaceable voices in music. His survival is not just personal, it belongs to all of us. Nelson Mandela. There are people in history who are described as great, and then there is Nelson Mandela, a man whose life story is almost too vast for ordinary language to contain. Born in 1918 in the Transkei region of South Africa, he became the most prominent figure in the struggle against apartheid, the brutal system of institutionalized racial segregation that governed South African life for decades. His activism, his arrest, his imprisonment, and his eventual emergence as a global symbol of justice and reconciliation comprise one of the most significant personal narratives of the 20th century. But behind that sweeping historical arc was a body under extraordinary physical assault. In 1964, Mandela was sentenced to life imprisonment and transferred to Robben Island, a facility off the coast of Cape Town where political prisoners were subjected to conditions designed to break them. He spent 18 years there, forced into hard labor in a lime quarry where the dust and the physical exertion, combined with the damp, cold conditions of the island, inflicted lasting damage on his lungs. During his imprisonment, Nelson Mandela contracted tuberculosis, a bacterial infection of the lungs that, in the medical conditions available to prisoners in apartheid South Africa, was both serious and poorly managed. He survived tuberculosis. He survived 27 years of imprisonment, 18 on Robben Island, followed by transfers to Pollsmoor Prison and Victor Verster Prison. He survived attempts to suppress him, to break him, to make him recant his beliefs in exchange for freedom. He refused, repeatedly and at enormous cost to his health and to the years of his life he would never recover. When Mandela walked out of Victor Verster Prison on February 11, 1990, his fist raised, his face composed, his body carrying the evidence of nearly 3 decades of confinement, the world witnessed something that defied ordinary explanation. He became the first democratically elected president of South Africa in 1994, serving until 1999. He passed away on December 5, 2013, at the age of 95. He proved that the human spirit, given enough purpose, can outlast almost anything. Tina Turner. Tina Turner is not simply a music legend. She is a survivor in the fullest, most literal sense of the word. A woman who escaped domestic violence, rebuilt her career from nothing in her 40s, and became one of the most successful touring artists in the history of live music. Her 1984 album, Private Dancer, sold over 20 million copies worldwide. Her Break Every Rule World Tour in 1987 set a record for the highest attended concert tour at that time. Songs like What's Love Got to Do With It, Proud Mary, and We Don't Need Another Hero belong permanently to the cultural landscape. But in the final years of her life, Tina Turner faced a convergence of health crises that would have overwhelmed almost anyone. In 2016, she was diagnosed with chronic high blood pressure, hypertension that had gone undertreated for years and had caused severe damage to her kidneys, leaving them functioning at a fraction of their normal capacity. The road ahead was stark. Without intervention, she faced either lifelong dialysis or a kidney transplant. Her husband, German music executive Erwin Bach, who had been her partner since 1986 and whom she married in 2013, offered to donate one of his kidneys. He was tested. He was compatible. And in 2017, he gave her one of his kidneys in a surgery performed in Switzerland. Tina Turner described the moment she learned Erwin would donate as one of overwhelming love and disbelief, that a person would give her a piece of themselves so that she could continue living. The recovery was long and demanding. The surgery was followed by complications that required additional medical attention and months of careful rehabilitation. But Tina Turner recovered. She spent her final years at her home in Küsnacht, Switzerland, quietly, peacefully, surrounded by the life and the love she had fought so hard to build. She passed away on May 24, 2023, at the age of 83. She did not go quietly into any ending. She chose every chapter, including the last one. Viola Davis. Viola Davis is the most awarded Black actress in the history of American entertainment. She holds an Emmy, a Tony, a SAG Award, and an Academy Award, becoming the first Black actress to achieve the Triple Crown of acting, having won an Oscar, an Emmy, and a Tony for performance in competitive categories. Her body of work, from How to Get Away with Murder to Fences to The Woman King, is a masterclass in emotional honesty, in the kind of performance that doesn't just entertain, but genuinely moves something in the people watching. But the emotional depth that makes Viola Davis extraordinary on screen comes directly from a life that required her to feel everything, including things that were profoundly painful and for much of her career entirely hidden from public view. Viola Davis grew up in extreme poverty in Central Falls, Rhode Island, conditions she has described with unflinching honesty in her memoir, Finding Me, published in 2022. Her childhood included food insecurity, exposure to violence, and experiences of trauma that left marks far deeper than material deprivation. Throughout her career, even as the awards accumulated, even as her name became synonymous with excellence, she battled severe depression. The external narrative was one of triumph and historic achievement. The internal experience was often something much darker. She has spoken candidly about struggling with feelings of worthlessness and inadequacy that fame and recognition did not resolve, about the way childhood trauma can remain active in the nervous system long after the circumstances that created it have changed. Her decision to enter therapy and to speak publicly about that decision was not incidental. In an industry and in a culture that frequently demands that Black women perform in vulnerability, Viola Davis choosing to say, "I needed help," and I sought it, is an act of genuine courage. She has used her platform, her memoir, and her public presence to advocate for mental health awareness, for trauma-informed care, and for the right of every person, regardless of how successful they appear to the outside world, to acknowledge when they are struggling. Viola Davis's greatest performance has never been on a screen. It has been the ongoing, imperfect, courageous act of being fully, honestly human. 19 legends. 19 battles fought mostly in silence, behind closed hospital doors, in quiet moments between performances, in the private hours nobody photographed. Here is what their stories teach us. Illness does not discriminate. It does not check your Grammy count, your Oscar shelf, or your championship rings before it arrives. What separates these individuals is not that they were spared, it's that they chose to keep going anyway. They remind us that resilience is not the absence of pain. It is the decision, made over and over again, to remain. Now we want to hear from you. Whose story hit you the hardest? And do you think we talk enough about the health struggles Black icons silently carry? Comment below and let's have the real conversation. Subscribe to Black Excellence Legends because these stories deserve to be told.